"Dad, please don't do this." The girl's voice trembled with despair, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I can handle it myself. I don't need your help." The man in the expensive suit slowly rose from behind the massive desk, his gray eyes cold as steel. In his hand, he clutched a photograph of his daughter, mutilated, turned into a meme for mockery. "Dear Riley," his voice was quiet, but each word sliced through the air like a blade. "Sometimes the world leaves us with only one choice, and Brandon Cross has already made his." The phone on the desk rang. One ring. That was all it took to change lives forever. "No!" the girl screamed, but it was already too late. The most interesting part is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ended. In the meantime, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. 24 hours ago, St. Augustine's private school was the jewel of the Hamptons, a place where New York's elite sent their children to receive not just an education, but lifelong connections. Gothic red brick towers loomed over manicured lawns, and the annual tuition exceeded the incomes of most American families. But behind the facade of prestige and tradition lay a brutal world of teenage hierarchy, where parental status determined a child's place in the food chain. And at the very bottom of this chain was 16-year-old Riley Morgan, who had been there for 3 years. Riley did not fit into the glossy world of St. Augustine. Her long chestnut hair was always braided simply, and her clothes, though expensive, never screamed wealth like the others. She preferred to sit in the library with a book rather than discuss the latest gossip in the school cafe. Her brown eyes always seemed thoughtful, as if she saw the world from a different angle, one inaccessible to her peers. Riley's problem was not that her family was poor, quite the opposite. The problem was that no one really knew what her father did. William Morgan was a man of mystery. He never appeared at school events, his name never flashed in social chronicles, and the family lived in relative isolation in a large house by the ocean. In a world where status meant everything, anonymity was worse than poverty, and that was something Brandon Cross exploited. Brandon was the golden boy of St. Augustine, the son of media mogul Richard Cross, owner of one of the largest television empires on the East Coast. At 17, he was already a star of the school basketball team, owned a Maserati, and had an army of fans. His blonde hair was always perfectly styled, and his smile could grace the cover of a magazine, if it weren't hiding cruelty. Brandon ruled the school through fear and charisma. His jokes became school memes. His opinions shaped the consciousness of the senior class. With a single glance, he could turn anyone into an outcast or, conversely, elevate them to the status of acceptance. And from the very first day Riley stepped into the school, she became his favorite target. It all started subtly. A shove in the hallway, supposedly accidental, a sarcastic comment about her clothes, coffee spilled on her textbooks. Riley thought that if she ignored what was happening, Brandon would lose interest and move on to someone else. She was wrong. The more Riley remained silent, the more she tried to become invisible, the more it irritated Brandon. Her calmness was a challenge to his authority, her silence a mockery of his ability to control others. And gradually, month by month, his jokes became increasingly cruel. By the beginning of senior year, the bullying had turned into outright harassment. Brandon created a special hashtag on social media, Ghost Girl Riley, hinting that she was like a ghost, unwanted and unnoticed. His followers picked up on this theme, creating memes with her photos taken secretly. But the real nightmare began on that October Monday, when Riley decided to try something new. On the weekend, she finally found the courage to go to the beauty salon. The stylist convinced her to get a haircut, trimming her long hair in favor of a modern shoulder-length bob. Riley looked at herself in the mirror for a long time after the haircut, and for the first time in a long while, she liked what she saw. She looked more mature, more confident. When Riley walked into school on Monday morning, several classmates even complimented her. For the first time in 3 years, she felt that maybe everything could change. Perhaps the new look would finally help her fit in with the group. She didn't know that Brandon had already noticed the changes and took them as a personal challenge. During the big break, when the schoolyard was full of students, Brandon approached Riley, who was sitting on a bench reading a book. He was accompanied by 3 friends, Jason Blake, Connor Whitmore, and Ethan Lee. They all came from wealthy families and were used to the world revolving around them. "Wow, look at that," Brandon said loudly, drawing the attention of those around. Our ghost girl has decided to become a person? Riley looked up from her book, her heart immediately racing. She recognized that tone, the harbinger of yet another humiliation. New haircut, Morgan? Brandon continued, leaning in closer. Trying to get attention? Or did Daddy finally make enough money for a hairdresser? A crowd began to gather around them. Students sensed the impending show. Brandon was notorious for his public performances against those who dared to stand out. By the way, Brandon pulled out his iPhone and started typing something. What does your dad even do? I could never figure it out. Is he a secret agent? Or just so unimportant that he's nowhere to be seen? The crowd laughed. Riley felt the heat rising in her cheeks. She tried to stand up and leave, but Jason Blake blocked her path. Don't rush, Brandon smirked. I'm really curious. You go to the most expensive school in the Hamptons, but no one knows where your family gets their money. Isn't that suspicious, don't you think? He turned to the crowd. What do you guys think? Maybe Riley's daddy is dealing in something illegal? Or he's just... Brandon paused for effect, then loudly declared, Nobody! The crowd's laughter grew louder. Someone started filming the scene on their phone. Riley felt the world closing in around her, as hundreds of eyes bore into her face, waiting for a reaction. You know what? Brandon continued, clearly getting into the groove. Let's conduct an investigation. I propose we create a social media group. Who is Mr. Morgan? Maybe one of us can figure out what our mysterious daddy does. He turned back to Riley. What do you say, Morgan? Will you share family secrets? Or will you stay silent, as usual? Riley stood there, gripping her book so tightly that the knuckles of her fingers turned white. The words stuck in her throat. She wanted to say something, wanted to defend herself and her father, but her voice refused to cooperate. Oh, right, I forgot, Brandon theatrically slapped his forehead. You're mute, our little mute princess from nowhere. The crowd erupted in laughter. Someone shouted, Maybe she really is a ghost. Another added, or a robot. Riley felt nausea rising in her throat. The world spun around her. She pushed past Jason and ran across the schoolyard, to the sounds of laughter and whistles from the crowd. She reached an empty classroom and locked herself in, pressing her back against the door. Only then did she allow herself to cry, silently as she had all those years. But the worst was yet to come. An hour after the incident in the yard, Riley discovered that the video of their conversation had already garnered over 1,000 views on Instagram. Someone from the students posted it with the caption, When you try to figure out if your dad is a CIA agent or just a loser. The comments under the video were harsh. Poor girl, she probably doesn't even know who her dad is. Maybe he's in prison, or in witness protection. Or maybe he's just dead and she doesn't want to talk about it. But the real blow came in the evening. Brandon didn't stop with the daytime incident. He created a fake Instagram profile under the name The Mysterious Mr. Morgan and began posting revelations about his criminal activities. The posts were written with mocking humor but looked convincing enough to mislead those who didn't know the truth. Hey kids, it's your friendly Daddy Morgan. Today I was doing my usual business, selling government secrets and trading weapons. Sorry I can't make it to school events. Too busy running from the FBI. The post was accompanied by a photoshopped image of a masked man, supposedly Riley's father. Within a few hours, the fake account gained over 500 followers, most of whom were school students and their friends. The comments were filled with laughing emojis and mocking replies. Riley sat in her room, scrolling through the endless feed of ridicule, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Tears streamed down her cheeks in a continuous flow, and a black hole of despair grew in her chest. She didn't hear her father come up the stairs. She didn't hear him quietly knock on the door. Only when a large, warm hand rested on her shoulder did Riley realize she was no longer alone. William Morgan was a tall man with piercing gray eyes and graying temples. At 45, he looked younger thanks to regular workouts and strict discipline. Usually his face was impassive, as if carved from marble. But now, looking at his crying daughter, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What happened? His voice was quiet, but it carried a steel strength. Riley tried to wipe her tears and pretend everything was fine, as she had done all these years. But this time, she ran out of strength. Dad, she whispered, I can't take it anymore. And she told him everything. About the years of bullying, the daily humiliations, how Brandon had turned her life into hell. about how today he publicly humiliated her again and now created a fake account, ridiculing their family. William listened silently, his face growing more stony with each word from his daughter. When Riley finished her story, he took her phone and studied the malicious comments and fake posts for several minutes. "Show me this boy," he finally said. Riley opened Brandon's profile on Instagram. Photos of a lavish lifestyle, expensive cars, exotic vacations. In the latest photo, Brandon posed with his father in front of the family yacht. The caption read, "How nice to be the son of a media mogul. Blessed life, shock your rich kid, shock the king of the world." William studied the photo for a long time, memorizing every detail of the boy's face. Then he silently returned the phone to his daughter. "Riley," he said, his voice calm but resonating with unwavering determination. "Some people only understand the language of strength, and it seems it's time to teach this boy a lesson." "Dad, no!" Riley was frightened. "Please, don't do anything. It will only make things worse." William looked at his daughter with a tenderness that no one but her had ever seen. He gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, you think you can endure this, that if you are quiet and invisible enough, they will leave you alone. But predators don't stop until they meet a stronger predator." He stood up and headed for the door, but turned back at the threshold. "Your mother was just as kind and patient as you. And do you know what happened to her? The world ate her alive. I won't let the same happen to you." After her father left, Riley sat in the darkness of her room for a long time, feeling that something fundamental had changed in their home. The air was thick with tension, as if before a storm. She didn't know that below, in his office, William Morgan was already picking up the phone. She didn't know that in 15 minutes he would be having a conversation that would change Brandon Cross's life forever. And she didn't know that her father had hidden the truth about who he really was from her all her life. William Morgan was not an ordinary businessman. He was someone much more powerful and dangerous. And Brandon Cross was about to find this out. 23 hours ago, William Morgan's office was located in the basement of their home and resembled a command center more than a typical workspace. The walls were lined with monitors displaying news channels, stock market updates, and various streams of information. A massive oak desk was cluttered with documents, and behind it stood a chair where William spent most of his time managing an empire known only to a select few. William Morgan was not just a wealthy man. He was one of the most influential shadow players on the East Coast. A man who never appeared on Forbes lists, but whose word could alter the fates of corporations and political careers. He was what people in elite circles referred to as a problem solver, someone who was called upon when legal means of resolving conflicts had been exhausted. His clients included senators and CEOs, judges and media moguls. When a powerful person faced a problem that couldn't be solved with money or connections, they called William Morgan. And the problem disappeared quietly, cleanly, without a trace. William made a living by knowing people's secrets. He had dossiers on half of New York's political elite, compromising material on the biggest businessmen, information about scandals that could destroy empires. But he never used this knowledge for blackmail or personal gain. He was a professional who valued his reputation more than money. That was why he lived in relative isolation with his daughter. His world was filled with dangers, and the less people knew about his family, the safer it was for Riley. He thought he could protect her by shielding her from his activities, but now he realized he had made a mistake. By giving his daughter a normal childhood, he hadn't prepared her for the cruelty of the world, and now some spoiled kid thought he could torment his family with impunity. William opened one of his computers and began gathering information about the Cross family. What he discovered made him smile coldly. Richard Cross, Brandon's father, was indeed a media mogul. His empire included 3 television channels, 2 radio stations, and several print publications. On paper, he was a successful businessman with an impeccable reputation. But William had other sources of information. Over the years of working as a problem solver, he had built an extensive network of contacts in various fields. Bankers who could provide financial information for a fee, private investigators, investigative journalists, even some law enforcement officers. Richard Cross was a public figure, which made him vulnerable. William knew that any influential media mogul had skeletons in their closet. It was just a matter of knowing where to look. His first call was to Marcus Vale, a private investigator he had been working with for over 10 years. "Marcus, I need everything on Richard Cross. Finances, connections, scandals. You have 48 hours. Cross from the media empire? He's a big fish, William. This won't come cheap. Money is not a problem. Time is. His second call was to Sarah Mitchell, an investigative journalist who owed him a favor for helping her obtain information for her past investigation. Sarah, remember our agreement? I need all unpublished materials on Richard Cross. Everything you have in your archives. The third call was to a bank employee who, for a good fee, sometimes provided consultations on financial operations for individuals of interest to William. By morning, he had a complete picture. What he discovered made him smile coldly. Richard Cross was indeed not just a media magnate. Marcus found evidence of his connections to dubious advertising schemes. Sarah provided recordings of conversations about bribing local officials for broadcasting licenses, and the banking contact uncovered suspicious transfers through offshore accounts. But the most interesting thing was something else. 3 years ago, one of Cross's television channels aired a story about a young politician accusing him of corruption. The story was based on fabricated documents but garnered high ratings. The politician, unable to withstand the harassment, committed suicide, and Cross had known about the falsity of the accusations from the very beginning. William leaned back in his chair, contemplating the situation. He had enough material in hand to dismantle Richard Cross's empire and send him to prison for 20 years. But he was a professional and did not like to use a sledgehammer where a scalpel would suffice. He picked up the phone and dialed the number. Richard Cross, a confident voice answered after the second ring. Mr. Cross, my name is William Morgan. I think we should talk. A pause. William heard the rapid breathing on the other end of the line. I don't know anyone by that name, Cross finally said, but there was already uncertainty in his voice. Of course you do, William replied calmly. 3 years ago, when you had problems with competitors trying to buy your channel in Boston, you reached out to me through mutual acquaintances. I helped resolve that issue. A new pause, longer this time. What do you want? Cross's voice had become cautious. To meet. Tomorrow at 8 in the morning. Montauk Restaurant on Main Street. Come alone. And what if I refuse? William smiled, although Cross could not see it. Then tomorrow evening, CNN will receive some very interesting documents regarding your financial operations over the past 5 years. And the FBI will get recordings of your conversations with Judge McNamara concerning the Harrison case. The silence on the line was so deep that William wondered if the connection had dropped. I'll be there, Cross finally whispered. Excellent. And Mr. Cross, it would be good if your son stopped bothering my daughter. Immediately. William hung up without waiting for a response. He knew that Richard Cross would spend a sleepless night trying to figure out how much this mysterious man knew and what he intended to do with that information. 18 hours ago, Richard Cross had not slept all night. He sat in his home office trying to recall all the details of the deal from 3 years ago and estimate what exactly William Morgan might know. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't quite remember the context of their acquaintance. By morning, he had made a decision. He was an influential man with an army of lawyers and connections in law enforcement. Whatever compromising material this Morgan had, Richard would find a way to neutralize it. He would not allow some shadowy figure to blackmail him over his son's school antics. The Montauk Restaurant was a quiet breakfast spot favored by the local elite. At 8 in the morning, there were few patrons, several businessmen engaged in morning negotiations, and a couple of elderly spouses at a corner table. Richard arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table with a good view, and ordered coffee. He was dressed in his best Armani suit, his hair perfectly styled, and white gold cufflinks gleamed on his cuffs. He wanted to show that he was dealing with a serious person, not a petty blackmailer. At 8 o'clock, a man entered the restaurant, and Richard immediately recognized him as William Morgan. Tall, with graying temples and a simple yet expensive gray suit, he moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling the situation, and his gray eyes methodically scanned the room, assessing potential threats and escape routes. William approached the table and sat down opposite Richard, not extending his hand for a handshake. Mr. Cross, he nodded. Thank you for coming. Let's get straight to the point, Richard said tensely. What do you want? Money? A position in one of my companies? Or is this just plain blackmail? William slowly sipped the coffee the waitress had brought him, taking his time to respond. His calmness irritated Richard more than any threats could. I want your son to leave my daughter alone, William finally said. completely and forever. Richard scoffed. Over childish squabbles? Are you serious? This is school. Kids always tease each other. Brandon hasn't done anything special. Nothing special? William pulled out his phone and showed Richard screenshots of a fake Instagram account created by Brandon. Your son created a fake profile portraying my family in a false light. He has systematically humiliated my daughter for 3 years. This is not child's play, Mr. Cross. This is bullying. Richard glanced at the screen and grimaced. He knew that Brandon sometimes went too far with his jokes, but he had no idea of the scale of what was happening. Fine, he said after a pause. I'll talk to my son. He'll delete that account and apologize to your daughter, but that's all I can do. Kids will be kids. William shook his head. I'm afraid that's not enough. He pulled a thick envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. Open it, he said simply. Richard took the envelope with suspicion and peered inside. His face instantly paled. Inside were photocopies of bank documents, recordings of phone conversations, financial reports, everything that could ruin his career and send him to prison. Where did you get this? He whispered. That's not important, William replied calmly. What matters is that I have the originals and digital copies in 3 different locations, including a safe in Switzerland. Richard feverishly sifted through the documents. There were proofs of all his sins over the past 10 years: bribery, tax fraud, connections to the mafia, news fabrication. Any one of these documents could destroy him, and together they represented a death sentence. What do you want? His voice trembled. I already said, your son will never approach my daughter again. He will not talk to her, will not look at her, will not even think about her. If he violates this condition even once, all these documents will end up in the prosecutor's hands. But that's impossible, Richard protested. They go to the same school. They will inevitably cross paths. Then you should consider transferring your son to another school, William coldly suggested. You can't demand that. I'm an influential person. I have connections in law enforcement. What can you do? William interrupted him, and for the first time, there were steel tones in his voice. Bribe another judge, like you did in the Harrison case? Or maybe order dirt on me, like you did with your competitors? Richard fell silent, realizing he had walked into a trap. This man knew too much, and trying to fight him would only worsen the situation. You have 24 hours, William continued, rising from the table. After that, I will start taking action. And believe me, Mr. Cross, you do not want to see what I'm capable of when I am protecting my family. He headed for the exit but turned at the threshold. Oh, and one more thing. If anything happens to my daughter, any injury, any accident, any problem at school, I will consider it your doing. And then these documents will be the least of your problems. After William left, Richard sat at the table for a long time, holding the envelope with the compromising material in his trembling hands. The waitress approached several times, offering more coffee, but he didn't hear her. For the first time in his life, Richard Cross felt helpless. He had built an empire using dirty methods, thinking that his wealth and connections would make him untouchable. But now he faced a man who played the same game, but at a much higher level. And this man threatened to destroy everything he had built because of his son's school antics. 16 hours ago, Brandon Cross woke up in a great mood. Yesterday's performance in the schoolyard went even better than he expected, and the fake Instagram account of Daddy Morgan had already gathered over 1,000 followers. The comments on his post were so nasty and inventive that Brandon laughed all evening reading them. He went down to the dining room for breakfast, whistling a popular tune. His father was already sitting at the table, but he looked strange, pale with dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept all night. Morning, Dad, Brandon said cheerfully, pouring himself some orange juice. You don't look so good. Worked late? Richard looked up at his son, and Brandon was surprised to see something resembling fear in his eyes. Brandon, we need to talk, his father said quietly. Sure, Dad. About what? Brandon took a bite of toast, not sensing the tension in his father's voice. About the girl at your school, Riley Morgan. Brandon raised his eyebrows in surprise. About the ghost girl? What's wrong with her? Don't tell me her parents complained to the principal? Her father came to me directly, Richard said slowly. Brandon laughed. Seriously? And what did he say? Complain that his little girl is sad at school? Brandon, his father's voice became firm. I'm serious. You need to stop any contact with that girl immediately. Delete that fake account you created and never go near her again. The smile vanished from Brandon's face. You're joking? Over some unknown guy who doesn't even attend school events? Dad, you know who we are. No one can make us... Shut up! Richard exploded, and Brandon flinched in surprise. His father had never raised his voice at him. Richard took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. Son, you don't understand who we're dealing with. William Morgan is not an ordinary parent. He is a very dangerous man who can destroy our family. Dangerous? Brandon asked skeptically. In what way dangerous? Is he a mobster? A terrorist? Or just a rich daddy who thinks he can scare everyone? Richard looked at his son with a long gaze, contemplating how much truth he could share with him. Brandon was a spoiled kid who had never faced the real consequences of his actions. Perhaps it was time to give him a reality check. He has dirt on me, Richard said quietly. Documents that could send me to prison for a very long time. Brandon blinked, not understanding. What documents? What are you talking about? About things I did to grow the business. Things that aren't exactly legal. Richard avoided direct eye contact with his son. Morgan somehow got evidence, and now he's blackmailing me. But that's just bluff, Brandon exclaimed. No one can threaten the Cross family. We have the best lawyers, connections in the police. We can... No, his father interrupted him. We can't. This man is playing a game whose rules you don't understand. And if you continue to bother his daughter, he will destroy us all. Brandon set his toast aside. His appetite had suddenly vanished. For the first time in his life, he saw his father scared, and it frightened him. Okay, he said slowly. I'll delete the account and leave the girl alone. But this is temporary, right? We'll find a way to deal with this guy? Richard shook his head. No, son. This is forever. And I'm serious. You don't even look in her direction. Because if something happens to his daughter, Morgan will think it's our doing. And I don't want to find out what he's capable of in that case. Brandon sat in silence, trying to process what he had heard. His world, where he was a prince capable of doing anything he wanted, suddenly collapsed. It turned out there were people you couldn't joke with and boundaries you couldn't cross. But why this girl? He finally asked. What's so special about her? Nothing, his father replied wearily. Just bad luck. You chose the wrong target. 14 hours ago, at St. Augustine's School, Wednesday began unusually. The first thing the students noticed was the disappearance of the fake Instagram account, the mysterious Mr. Morgan. The account simply vanished, as if it had never existed, leaving behind only screenshots on the phones of those who managed to capture them. The second change was even stranger. Brandon Cross, who usually arrived at school in his red Maserati with loud music, showed up today in a regular black sedan with a driver. He looked pensive and did not respond to his friends' greetings in the courtyard. Riley noticed the changes but did not pay them much attention. She thought Brandon was just preparing a new cruel prank, more sophisticated than the previous ones. So when she saw him walking towards her during the big break, she braced herself for another humiliation. But instead of the usual crowd of onlookers and mocking comments, Brandon approached her alone. His usual confident smile was absent, and his eyes avoided direct contact. Morgan, he said quietly, glancing around as if checking whether anyone was overhearing their conversation. Riley looked up from her book, expecting a trick. Brandon was clearly struggling to find the words, which was completely unlike him. I deleted that account, and I won't, well, you know. Riley blinked, not understanding what was happening. What? I won't bother you anymore, Brandon blurted out quickly. Just, let's forget everything that happened, okay? He turned and walked away quickly, leaving Riley in complete bewilderment. It was so unexpected that she sat there for several minutes, trying to comprehend what had just happened. But the strangest part was yet to come. Throughout the day, Brandon acted as if Riley didn't exist at all. When their paths crossed in the hallway, he would turn away or study something on his phone. When she passed by his table in the cafeteria, he suddenly became engrossed in conversation with his friends. This change did not go unnoticed by the other students. Jason Blake, Brandon's best friend, even asked during lunch, Hey Brandy, what's up with you today? You're acting kinda weird. And where's that ghost girl folder account? It was fun. Brandon shrugged, not lifting his eyes from his plate. Got tired of it. Deleted it. Seriously? Connor Whitmore was surprised. I thought you enjoyed those games with Morgan. What changed? Nothing changed, Brandon replied sharply. There are just more important things than teasing some losers. The friends exchanged glances, sensing that Brandon was hiding something, but they didn't dare to press him. Everyone knew he had mood swings, especially when there were problems with his father at home. Meanwhile, Riley was having one of the most peaceful days at school in the last 3 years. No one pushed her in the hallway, no one mocked her clothes, no one commented on her appearance. For the first time in a long while, she could focus on her studies without looking over her shoulder for the next humiliation. But the calm did not bring her relief. On the contrary, Riley felt a growing anxiety. She knew Brandon well enough to understand. He was not the type to just give up. His sudden change in behavior was too abrupt, too unnatural. After school, Riley walked home for a long time, pondering the day's events. What made Brandon change his tactics so drastically? Did the principal or the teachers finally intervene? But then why hadn't anyone told her about it? Or maybe her father had done something after all, despite her pleas not to interfere. That thought made her quicken her pace. At home, she went straight to her father's office, but it was empty. William appeared only at dinner, looking as usual, calm and unflappable. How was school? He asked at dinner, cutting his steak. Good, Riley replied cautiously. Very good, actually. Brandon, he no longer bothers me. Wonderful, William nodded, as if there was nothing unusual about it. Dad, Riley set down her fork. Did you do something? William looked up at her. What do you mean? I mean, Brandon. His behavior today was strange. He suddenly apologized and said he wouldn't bother me anymore. That's not like him at all. Maybe he just grew up, William suggested. Or he realized his behavior was unacceptable. Riley shook her head. No, people like Brandon don't change just like that. Something scared him, really scared him. William continued eating, not responding to his daughter's suspicious gaze. Dad, please tell me the truth. What did you do? William slowly set down his knife and fork, took a napkin, and wiped his mouth. Then he looked at his daughter with a long, thoughtful gaze. Riley, there are things in this world that are better left unknown. There are ways to solve problems that work, but that can scare good people like you. Did you threaten him? Riley asked directly. I spoke with his father, William replied evasively, and explained the situation from an adult's perspective. That's not an answer to my question. William sighed. Sweetheart, sometimes the only language predators understand is the language of strength. I just made sure the Cross family understood the seriousness of the situation. Riley felt something cold stir in her chest. Dad, what exactly did you tell them? Enough for them to understand that hurting my family is a bad idea. Riley pushed her plate away, losing her appetite. You scared them. You scared a 17-year-old boy. I protected my daughter, William said firmly. You suffered in silence for 3 years, thinking you could wait it out. But predators don't stop on their own. They need to be stopped. But not like that, Riley exclaimed. Not through fear and threats. Now Brandon is afraid to even look in my direction. He walks around like a beaten dog. This isn't a solution, Dad. It's the only thing that works, William interrupted her. Do you think the problem could have been solved with kindness and understanding? What if you had asked Brandon to stop tormenting you? Would he have listened? Riley was silent, realizing her father was right, but still feeling nauseated by the methods he used. Sweetheart, William's voice softened. I know you're a good person. That's why I don't want the world to break you. Your mother was just as kind, and look what happened to her. Riley looked up. What happened to Mom? William fell silent, realizing he had said too much. The topic of Riley's mother had always been taboo in their home. William only said that she died when Riley was little, but never went into details. Dad, Riley insisted, what happened to Mom? Not now, William said quietly. That's a story for another time. He stood up from the table and headed for the door, but Riley called out to him, Dad, do you promise you won't harm Brandon or his family? William turned around. As long as they don't harm you, they have nothing to fear. After he left, Riley sat at the table, for a long time reflecting on what had happened. She got what she had dreamed of for years, freedom from Brandon's bullying, but the price of that freedom turned out to be higher than she could have imagined. For the first time in her life, she began to understand that her father was not just a loving parent protecting his daughter. He was someone much darker and more dangerous. And now this man was using his power in her name. 8 hours ago, the next day at school, the atmosphere was even more tense. The news that Brandon Cross had suddenly stopped his games with Riley Morgan spread quickly among the students. Whispers filled the hallways. Theories were formed and speculations were made. "I heard Riley's parents finally complained to the principal," Madison Hart whispered to her friend at the lockers. "No, I think Brandon just got bored," Emily Chen countered. "He always quickly loses interest in his victims." "Or maybe he fell in love with her," Grace Collins giggled. "Remember how in 5th grade Tommy Roberts used to pull Sarah Mitchell's hair? And then it turned out he had a crush on her?" But those who knew Brandon better understood that it wasn't about losing interest or sudden infatuation. His behavior was too abrupt, too tense. He avoided not only Riley but all conversations about her, as if the mere mention of her name caused him discomfort. Jason Blake, Connor Whitmore, and Ethan Lee, Brandon's closest friends, gathered during lunch to discuss their leader's strange behavior. "Something's wrong," Jason said, lowering his voice. "Brandy is acting like a paranoid. Did you see how he reacted when Morgan walked into the cafeteria today? He literally turned away and started studying his phone. And when Madison asked him about that account, he nearly exploded," Connor added. "He told her to shut up and mind her own business." Ethan shook his head. "It feels like someone is intimidating him. But who? Who could scare Brandon Cross?" "Maybe his dad," Jason suggested. "Perhaps Richard Cross found out what his son was doing and made him stop." "But why?" Connor didn't understand. "Mr. Cross has always supported Brandon in everything. Remember how last year he threatened to sue the coach who benched Brandy?" Meanwhile, the subject of their discussion sat at a nearby table, trying to focus on his food, but constantly catching himself glancing around, checking where Riley was. Not because he planned to approach her. On the contrary, he wanted to make sure he kept a safe distance from her. The conversation with his father the day before had turned Brandon's world upside down. For the first time in his life, he faced the real consequences of his actions, and it scared him. He had spent a sleepless night pondering who Riley's father might be and what had made his own father, one of the most influential people in Hamptons, so frightened. Brandon tried to find information about William Morgan online, but the search results were scant. A few mentions in business news, a couple of photos from charity events, and that was it. For someone capable of intimidating Richard Cross, that was suspiciously little. "Hey, Brandy," Jason nudged him with his elbow. "We're talking about something, and you're daydreaming. What's going on with you?" Brandon jolted, returning to reality. "What? Oh, sorry, I was thinking about tomorrow's match." "What match?" Ethan was surprised. "Tomorrow's Thursday. We don't have any games until Saturday." Brandon realized he had been caught in a lie, which upset him even more. He used to be a master of improvisation, able to talk his way out of any situation with charisma and wit. But now he felt insecure, as if the ground was slipping from beneath his feet. "I meant practice," he quickly corrected himself. "The coach said if we don't improve our defense, he'll bench someone." His friends nodded, but Brandon saw doubt in their eyes. They knew him too well to believe these awkward excuses. At that moment, Riley walked through the cafeteria with a tray in her hands. She wasn't looking in Brandon's direction, but he still tensed up as if expecting a blow. His friends noticed this reaction. "Brandy," Connor said quietly, "what's going on between you and Morgan? Why are you reacting to her like that?" "I'm not reacting to anything," Brandon snapped. "I just don't see the point in wasting time on that loser." "But you used to like her," Jason insisted. "You said her reactions were funny, that it was interesting to watch her try to become invisible." "Well, I'm just over it," Brandon said sharply, drawing the attention of students at nearby tables. The silence that fell over their table was telling. Friends exchanged glances, realizing that Brandon was lying, but not knowing how to make him tell the truth. Finally, Ethan decided to ask a direct question. "Brandy, has someone threatened you? If you have problems, we can help. Our families have influence. We can—" "No one has threatened me," Brandon exploded, jumping up from his chair. "And I don't need your help." I just decided to focus on more important things than teasing some quiet kids. He grabbed his backpack and ran out of the cafeteria, leaving his friends bewildered. In the hallway, Brandon leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. The lie was becoming harder to maintain, and the fear he felt at every mention of Riley only intensified. For the first time in his life, Brandon Cross felt weak, and the worst part was that he didn't understand how to fix it. 4 hours ago. After school, Riley didn't go home right away. Instead, she turned towards a small park near the school, where she loved to read on warm days. She needed time to think about what had happened over the last 2 days. Brandon's sudden change in behavior should have brought her relief. For the first time in 3 years, she could walk through school without looking over her shoulder, without expecting another humiliation. But instead of joy, she felt anxiety. The conversation with her father the day before had opened her eyes to many things. William Morgan was not just a loving parent, he was a man capable of scaring an influential family to the point that they made their son completely change his behavior overnight. What scared Riley even more was the realization that she didn't really know her father at all. All these years, she thought he was just a businessman who preferred to stay in the shadows. But now it was becoming clear that behind his calm facade lurked something much darker. "Hey," a quiet voice came from the side. Riley turned and saw Sophia Kelly, a classmate with whom she sometimes partnered in literature classes. Sophia was a quiet girl from the middle tier of the school hierarchy, not popular but not an outcast either. She was inconspicuous enough to avoid the attention of predators like Brandon. "Hi," Riley replied, surprised that someone had decided to approach her. Sophia sat down on the bench next to her, clearly nervous. "Can I ask you something?" Riley nodded, expecting yet another question about what had happened with Brandon. Over the last 2 days, several classmates had approached her trying to find out the details. Are you okay?" Sophia asked, and the question surprised Riley with its sincerity. "What do you mean?" "Well," Sophia hesitated, "I know that Brandon and his friends have been tormenting you for a long time, and suddenly he just stopped. Everyone thinks that's good, but I feel like it bothers you." Riley looked at her classmate in surprise. Sophia was the first person to notice her inner turmoil. "Why do you care?" Riley asked cautiously. Sophia blushed. "Because I know what it's like to be a target. In middle school, I had problems with a group of girls. They tormented me for 2 years, and then suddenly they stopped. And you know what? It was almost worse than the bullying itself." "Why?" "Because I didn't understand why they stopped. I was constantly waiting for a catch, thinking they were planning something terrible. And also because," Sophia paused, choosing her words, "because part of me got used to their attention, even the negative kind. Without it, I felt empty." Riley pondered Sophia's words. Was there a grain of truth in them? Had she gotten so used to the role of the victim that its absence scared her? "What made them stop?" Riley asked. "One of them transferred to another school, and the others just lost interest," Sophia shrugged. "But your situation is different. Brandon is not the type to just lose interest. Something stopped him." Riley remained silent, unsure of how much to share. "Riley," Sophia said gently, "if you need to talk to someone, I know we don't know each other very well, but sometimes it's easier to open up to someone who isn't involved in the situation." For the first time in a long while, Riley felt the temptation to confide in someone. Years of isolation had taught her to keep everything inside, but the burden was becoming too heavy. "My father intervened," she finally said. "He talked to Brandon's father." "And what?" "I don't know exactly, but I think he scared him." Sophia frowned. "Scared Richard Cross? But he's one of the most powerful people in town. What could scare him?" "I don't know," Riley said sadly. "And that scares me. It turns out my father is capable of things I never even suspected." "But isn't that a good thing?" Sophia asked. "Finally, someone protected you." "Yes, but at what cost?" Riley looked at the sunset sky. "Brandon now walks around like a beaten dog. He's afraid to even look in my direction. This isn't justice, Sophia. It's intimidation." "And what was just about what he did to you for 3 years?" Sophia pointed out reasonably. Riley had no answer. Sophia was right. Brandon deserved the consequences of his actions. But the method her father used felt wrong to her. "You know what scares me the most," Riley said quietly. "That I finally got the freedom I've dreamed of for years. But it feels stolen, undeserved. Why undeserved? Because I didn't do anything for it. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't fight back. I didn't find my own way to deal with the problem. My father solved it for me using methods I don't approve of, Sophia pondered. But maybe it's not about how the problem was solved, but about what you do with it moving forward. You have a chance to start over. Take it. Those words made Riley look at the situation from a different angle. Maybe Sophia was right. Maybe it was worth focusing not on how freedom was obtained, but on how to use it. Thank you, Riley said, genuinely smiling for the first time in a long while. For listening? Anytime, Sophia smiled back. And Riley, if you want to have lunch together tomorrow, I'd be happy. After Sophia left, Riley sat in the park for a long time, reflecting on their conversation. For the first time in years, someone had offered her friendship without expecting anything in return. And that feeling was remarkably warm. But the joy of new friendship couldn't completely drown out the anxiety about what her father had done and who he really was. And when Riley finally went home, she was determined to find out the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. 2 hours ago, the Morgan home greeted Riley with its usual silence. William had not yet returned from his mysterious business meetings, and Riley had the opportunity to do what she had been thinking about all day, try to uncover the truth about her father. She went up to her room, turned on her computer, and began her search. William Morgan plus Hamptons yielded sparse results. Some mentions in society columns, a photo from a charity auction, a brief biography in an elite golf club catalog. Riley tried various combinations of words, adding business, company, investments. The results were just as uninformative. For a man living in a mansion worth several $1 million, William Morgan left surprisingly few digital footprints. This alone was suspicious. In an age where every sneeze made it onto the internet, a complete lack of information seemed unnatural. Riley recalled her father's words about her mother being too good for this world. Perhaps if she found information about her mother, it would shed light on the family's past. Elizabeth Morgan, plus death, plus obituary. The search yielded several pages of results, but none were suitable. Riley knew her mother had died 10 years ago when she was 6, but her father had never shared specific details. She tried her mother's maiden name, Sinclair, and then the search yielded something interesting. Elizabeth Sinclair, 32, found dead in her car. The headline of a news article from 10 years ago made Riley's heart stop. With trembling fingers, she opened the article. Elizabeth Sinclair Morgan, wife of businessman William Morgan, was found dead in her Mercedes-Benz near the Hampton Bays Marina on Tuesday morning. According to preliminary police reports, the cause of death was an overdose of sleeping pills. A note was found next to Mrs. Morgan's body, in which she apologized to her family and expressed love for her 6-year-old daughter, Riley. Police sources report that Mrs. Morgan had been struggling with depression for a long time after a car accident 2 years ago that claimed the life of her youngest son. The family asked for privacy during this difficult time and request no statements to the press. Riley stared at the screen, unable to believe what she had read. Her mother committed suicide? She had a younger brother who died? Why had her father never told her about this? Her hands shook as she searched for additional information about the car accident. And what she found shocked her even more. 4-year-old Michael Morgan died in a car accident on Highway 27 when the family vehicle collided with a truck. The truck was driven by Thomas Harrison, who was intoxicated at the time of the accident. Harrison died at the scene. The child's mother, Elizabeth Morgan, sustained serious injuries and was hospitalized. Riley found several more articles about the trial against the transportation company that hired the drunk driver. The process lasted nearly 2 years and ended with the Morgan family receiving a settlement of $5 million. But the most shocking was the last article she found. Harrison Transport declared bankruptcy following the court ruling in the fatal accident case. Company owner Robert Harrison, father of the deceased driver, claimed that the Morgan family used illegal pressure tactics to obtain an unjustifiably high settlement. This was not justice, but revenge, Harrison said in an interview with a local newspaper. They have connections that allow them to destroy honest families. Riley leaned back in her chair, trying to process what she had read. The picture was starting to come together, and it was horrifying. Her younger brother died in an accident caused by a drunk driver. Her mother fell into depression and ultimately took her own life. And her father used his connections and illegal pressure tactics to destroy the family of the guilty driver. Suddenly, William's words that the world ate her mother alive took on a new meaning. Perhaps he blamed himself for not being able to protect the family, and now he was willing to do anything to protect the only person he had left. Riley. The sound of the front door opening interrupted her thoughts. Her father was home. Riley quickly closed all the browser tabs and went downstairs. William stood in the hallway taking off his coat. He looked tired, and for the first time, Riley noticed how much he had aged in recent years. "Hi, Dad," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Hi, sweetie. How was school?" He kissed her on the forehead, as he did every day. "Good. Dad, can I ask you a question?" William looked at her warily. "Of course. Why did you never tell me the truth about Mom?" William's face hardened. He slowly hung his coat on the rack, not answering the question. "Dad? What exactly do you want to know?" His voice became cautious. "Everything. How she died, why she died, and who Michael was." William closed his eyes as if in pain. "Where did you find this out?" "On the internet." "Dad, why did you lie to me?" William walked into the living room and sank heavily into a chair. Riley followed him. "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I just wanted to protect you from pain. But I had a brother, and Mom didn't die of an illness. She committed suicide. How could you hide this from me?" William was silent for a long time, staring out the window. When he spoke, his voice was full of the pain he had hidden for many years. "Michael was born when you were 2 years old. You adored him, called him my little prince. When he died," William's voice broke, "when he died, your mother fell apart. She blamed herself for being behind the wheel. The doctors said it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have prevented the accident. But she didn't listen." Riley felt tears welling up in her eyes. "For 2 years, I tried to help her. The best psychiatrists, medications, therapy. Nothing worked. She was fading before my eyes. And then one morning I woke up and she wasn't there. She left a note asking me to forgive her and to take good care of you." "Dad," Riley whispered, her voice filled with pain, "I decided that you shouldn't carry this burden. You were too young to understand. I thought it would be better if you remembered your mom happy." "And what about the Harrisons? Did you really destroy them?" William looked at his daughter with a long gaze. "Riley, there are things that—" "No," Riley interrupted him. "Stop protecting me. I have the right to know the truth about my family." William sighed. "Yes, I destroyed their family. And you know what? I don't regret it. Their son killed my child, and they tried to evade responsibility. They hired the best lawyers, tried to shift the blame onto your mother. They said she was inattentive behind the wheel." But nothing." William's voice became harsh. "They got what they deserved. And if anyone hurts you, they'll get the same. Because I won't let myself lose another child." The silence that fell in the room was heavy. Riley looked at her father and saw not a loving parent, but a man consumed by a thirst for revenge and fear of loss. "Dad," she said quietly, "what did you do to the Cross family?" William stood up and headed for the exit. "What was necessary?" "That's not an answer." He turned around. "That's the only answer you'll get. And Riley, don't dig into the past anymore. Some stories are better left buried." After he left, Riley sat for a long time in the empty living room, trying to process what she had learned. Her family was not just wealthy and influential. It was shattered by tragedy, which had turned her father into a man capable of terrible things in the name of protecting those he loved. And now this man was using his dark power to protect her from a school bully. Riley understood that she would never be able to look at her father the same way again. And the scariest part was that she wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Now Riley hadn't slept all night. The knowledge she had gained about her family's past swirled in her head, refusing to let her rest. By morning, she had made a decision. She needed to talk to Brandon, not to apologize for her father's actions, and not to resume their confrontation, but to understand what exactly William Morgan had done to the Cross family. At school, she found Brandon at his locker during lunch break. He was standing alone. His usual entourage of friends had disappeared somewhere. When Riley approached him, he flinched as if shocked. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "I'm not going to report you." Brandon looked at her with poorly concealed fear. "What do you want?" "To talk, alone." I, I don't think that's a good idea, he mumbled, glancing around. Please, Riley's voice held a sincere plea. 5 minutes. There's a quiet section in the library. Brandon hesitated. On one hand, his father had strictly forbidden him to even talk to her. On the other hand, what was so wrong about just listening? They would be in a public place, among people. Okay, he reluctantly agreed, but not for long. They walked to a far corner of the library where a few reading chairs were nestled between tall shelves. Riley chose a spot far from other students, but still in view of the librarian. What did my father do? She asked immediately, speaking barely above a whisper. Brandon nervously looked around, making sure no one could hear them. You? Don't you know? I know that he talked to your father, and that after that conversation, you started acting like a scared rabbit. What exactly did he say to him? Brandon sat down in the chair as if his legs had given out. He has information, documents about my father, things that could destroy our family. What things? I don't know for sure, Brandon admitted. My father only said it concerns the business. Some financial manipulations, deals that are better kept secret. Your father somehow found out everything. Riley felt a chill spreading through her body. And what does your father have to do? Make sure I never come near you again, not even look in your direction. Otherwise, these documents will end up in the prosecutor's office. Brandon looked at her with desperate eyes. Riley, I've never seen my father so scared, and he's not the type to be easily frightened. I'm sorry, Riley said quietly, and surprisingly, she really felt sorry. Sorry? Brandon laughed bitterly. You feel sorry? I turned your life into hell for 3 years, and you feel sorry for me? Yes, Riley simply replied, because what my father did is wrong. You deserve consequences for your actions, but not like this. Brandon looked at her in astonishment. Are you serious? After everything I've done to you? I'm not justifying your actions. You caused me a lot of pain. But my father's method, that's not justice. It's revenge. Silence stretched on. Finally, Brandon asked, what now? Does your father plan to keep us in fear for the rest of our lives? I don't know, Riley answered honestly, but I'll try to talk to him. And you think he'll listen to you? Riley shrugged. I don't know, but it's worth a try. Brandon studied her face as if trying to understand if he could trust her. Why are you doing this? Why help me after everything? Riley was silent for a long time, choosing her words. Because if I don't stop my father now, who knows what he'll do next? Today he threatens your family over school bullying. And tomorrow? You're afraid of him, Brandon realized. Yes, Riley admitted. I'm afraid of what he's become. And I'm afraid of what I might become if I let him continue. They didn't notice when the librarian, Mrs. Chen, approached their table. Excuse me, she said quietly. Miss Morgan, the administration is asking for you. Your father has come to pick you up from school. He says the family situation requires immediate attention. Riley and Brandon exchanged glances. Riley's heart raced. Her father never came to school without prior notice. Where is he? She asked, her voice trembling. In the principal's office. But he asked that you come to him in the library, said he wants to talk to you here, in a calm setting, before going home. Riley stood up, and a few seconds later saw her father walking through the library accompanied by the assistant principal, Mr. Fields. William's face was pale with rage, and his gray eyes burned with a cold fire. Thank you, Mr. Fields, William said to the assistant principal. I'll take my daughter home. We have a family situation. Mr. Fields nodded and stepped back toward the exit but remained nearby, watching the situation. Riley. William's voice was quiet but full of threat. Gather your things, we're leaving. Immediately. Brandon shrank back in the chair, trying to become invisible. Riley stood up, feeling her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Dad, why did you come to school? What happened? I called you 3 times. You didn't answer. William took a step closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. The app showed that you were still at school, even though classes ended half an hour ago. I got worried. Riley checked her phone and indeed saw 3 missed calls from her father. She hadn't heard them in silent mode. Then I called the school and asked them to check where you were. The secretary said she saw you in the library. And when I arrived and came in here, His voice grew increasingly tense. I saw my daughter sitting with a boy to whom I clearly made it known that he should keep his distance from her. Riley realized that her father had simply seen them with his own eyes upon entering the library. No surveillance cameras, just parental paranoia and a twist of fate. Riley was horrified to understand that her father had been watching her all this time. Dad, please, let's talk at home. No, we're talking now. William turned to Brandon. And you, boy, have you forgotten our agreement? Brandon trembled. She came up to me herself. I didn't. Shut up! William exploded, and Brandon shrank even further. Dad, stop! Riley exclaimed, stepping between her father and Brandon. He didn't do anything. Mrs. Chen, hearing the shouting, hurried over. Mr. Morgan, please, speak more quietly. This is a library. Sorry, William gritted through his teeth, but his voice remained tense. We're leaving now. Dad, stop! Riley cried out again, positioning herself between her father and Brandon. He didn't do anything. William looked at his daughter in astonishment. You're defending him after what he did to you? I'm defending what's right. Riley raised her voice to her father for the first time in her life, but immediately caught herself and lowered it to a whisper. What you're doing is wrong. We're leaving. Right now, William hissed. We'll talk at home. No. Riley stood her ground, crossing her arms over her chest. I'm not going anywhere until we discuss this here. William grabbed his daughter by the arm. Riley, don't make me use force. Let go of me, she said quietly but firmly. Mrs. Chen nervously shifted from foot to foot. Perhaps you should move your family discussion to a more appropriate place? You're right, William agreed, but his grip on his daughter's arm only tightened. Riley, we're leaving. I said no. William pulled her toward the exit, but Riley resisted. At one point, he yanked her arm sharply and she lost her balance, hitting her shoulder against the edge of the shelf. Ouch! She cried out in pain. Miss Morgan, are you okay? The librarian asked anxiously. Everyone froze. William looked at his hand in horror, as if he couldn't believe what he had done. Riley rubbed her bruised shoulder, staring at her father with wide eyes. Riley, he whispered. Sweetheart, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't come near me. She stepped back. Don't you dare come near me. Mrs. Chen realized that the situation had spiraled out of control. Mr. Morgan, I think you should leave the school, and Miss Morgan can stay here until she's ready to go home. Daughter, please. No. Riley hugged herself, still rubbing her sore shoulder. You've become just like those you're trying to protect me from. You use force to control people. You intimidate and threaten. And now you're ready to use force against your own daughter. William tried to take a step toward her, but Riley recoiled even further. I said, don't come near. Mrs. Chen understood that the situation was critical. Mr. Morgan, I must ask you to leave the school premises immediately, and Miss Morgan can stay here as long as she needs. Brandon, who had been sitting pressed against the shelf the whole time, finally mustered the courage to stand up. Mr. Morgan, please leave. You're scaring her. William looked at the boy in surprise. The one who had recently trembled in fear at the mention of his name was now defending his daughter. Riley looked at her father one last time. In his eyes, she saw despair, pain, and the understanding that he had crossed a line that should not have been crossed. No, she quietly said in response to the librarian's question about whether she was okay. I'm not okay. William slowly nodded to Mrs. Chen and headed for the exit, realizing that further attempts would only worsen the situation. In the library corridor, he stopped, seeing through the glass wall how Riley stood, hugging herself, while Brandon awkwardly tried to comfort her. William wanted to turn back, but he stopped, remembering her words. Riley, he called out, loud enough for her to hear through the glass. She didn't turn around. I didn't mean to. You know I didn't mean to. I know. Her voice was empty, though she spoke without looking back. But you did it anyway. Daughter, please, let's talk at home. I'll explain everything. Now she turned around and William was horrified to see that there was neither anger nor resentment on her face. There was something much worse. Disappointment. Explain what? How you went from being a loving father to someone willing to use force against his own child? How you went from being the protector of the family to someone from whom the family needs protection? Each word hit like a hammer. William felt everything he had lived for over the past 10 years crumbling. "I did it for you." "No," Riley shook her head. "You did it for yourself, to feel the control you lost when Mom and Michael died. But you know what? You couldn't protect them, and now you can't protect me, because the biggest threat in my life is you." Those words broke William completely. He leaned against the wall, feeling tears rolling down his cheeks, the first in many years. "Riley, forgive me," he whispered. "Please forgive me." Riley approached the glass wall separating them and placed her palm against the glass. Her heart broke at the sight of her broken father. "I forgive you, Dad," she said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I can live with who you've become." William looked at her with tear-filled eyes. "What should I do? How can I fix what I've done?" "Let me go," Riley simply said. "Stop trying to control my world. Let me deal with my problems, make my own mistakes, become strong on my own. What if it hurts you? Then it will hurt me, but it will be my pain, not your revenge for it." Students began to gather in the hallway, drawn by the unusual scene. Riley helped her father to his feet. "Go home, Dad. I need time to think." William nodded and slowly walked toward the exit. At the threshold, he turned back. "I love you, Riley, more than life." "I know," she replied, "and that's why it hurts so much." After her father left, Riley returned to the music class, where a stunned Brandon was still sitting. He looked at her with something resembling admiration. You stood up to your own father. For me." "Not for you," Riley said tiredly. "For what's right." Brandon slowly stood up. "Riley, I'm so sorry. For everything. For the past 3 years. For today. For you losing your father because of me." "I didn't lose him," Riley shook her head. "He lost himself long before he knew you existed. I just finally saw it." They stood in silence, two teenagers whose lives had changed forever in the last half hour. "What happens now?" Brandon asked. "I don't know," Riley answered honestly. "But I know one thing. No one will decide for us who we should be anymore. Neither my father nor yours nor anyone else." She headed for the door but paused on the threshold. "And Brandon, next time you want to feel strong at someone else's expense, remember this day. Remember how quickly the strong can become weak and the victim can become strong." After Riley left, Brandon sat in the empty classroom for a long time, processing what had happened. For the first time in his life, he understood that true strength is not the ability to hurt others, but the ability to make tough decisions, even when they go against one's own interests. And a few miles away from the school, William Morgan sat in his office looking at a photo of his late wife and son. For the first time in 10 years, he allowed himself to mourn not only their deaths, but also the death of the person he once was. He took out his phone and began deleting files containing compromising information about the Cross family. It was the least he could do. Perhaps the only thing he could do to start the long journey back to humanity. A message from Riley flashed on the phone screen. "I love you, Dad, but I need time." William pressed the phone to his chest and cried. This time not from pain, but from hope. Perhaps it wasn't too late. Perhaps he could still regain the trust of the only person who meant something to him. Perhaps love could indeed conquer fear. That day at St. Augustine's School, something greater happened than just the resolution of a conflict between students. A meeting of two worlds occurred, the world where strength decides everything, and the world where being right is more important than strength. And for the first time in a long while, being right won. But the price of that victory was horrifying. A shattered family, a father who lost his daughter, and a girl who, at 16, realized that even the most sincere love can become destructive if there are no boundaries. Riley Morgan walked home through the empty streets of the Hamptons, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. But in that solitude, there was also freedom. The freedom to choose who to be, how to live, and what to fight for. And perhaps that was the most important lesson of all. Sometimes true love requires the ability to let go, even if it breaks your heart.